Chicago Public Library is very pleased to be co-hosting today's event with two of our longtime partners and great advocates for Chicago and Chicago's neighborhoods and communities. Of course, the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation and the Chicago Community Trust.
We're here this afternoon because I couldn't get into a restaurant in Aspen, Colorado last July, which caused me to be crossing a street in search of another place to eat, which caused me to run into Jim Wallis in the middle of that street, and the rest is history. He told me of a powerful new book he was finishing and how he was planning a book tour. When I learned more about the book, my response was, this is too big, too important for a book tour. This is about a national movement to change the realities of life experienced by African Americans in our country, to reject the benefits of white privilege borne on the backs of so much disparity. And we had concluded that the most important issue facing Chicago, the issue that continues to poison our dreams and diminish our opportunities, is race and segregation. For the past 2 years, we have heard from thousands of our fellow residents speaking courageously at on-the-table conversations that the #1 issue of our times is race and segregation. We can't not put this at the top of our agenda and invest the full might of the Chicago Community Trust to work with our community and lead a community conversation that moves us to moments of truth and reconciliation, repentance, and rebirth. With that, let me invite Reverend Wallis to present his book.
We're turning a book tour into a town meeting tour. We were in New York, in Washington, D.C., and in Baltimore last week, in Ferguson on Sunday, then all over the country, to have these town meetings. And really, what's clear to me, Jesus often told parables, stories, to learn lessons from. So the book talks about how Baltimore was a parable, Ferguson is a parable, Chicago is a parable. Parables are the stories you need to learn the right lessons from. This panel will help us today learn the right lessons for Chicago and this nation. I knew this book would be painfully timely in ways we didn't even understand at the time. And of course, from Detroit, right up the road from me in Flint, Michigan, another parable is taking place. A parable that teaches us that racism is in the air that we breathe and the water that we drink. And when political candidates fuel the energies of racial fear and hatred, they are poisoning and polluting the political atmosphere of this country. We didn't have a foundation to our nation, as some would like to suggest, where all men were created equal, and now we're on the road to a perfect union. At the beginning of the founding of this nation, it was stated and said unequivocally that black lives matter less than white lives. So the Black Lives Matter movement is really directly aiming at what I would call America's original sin. A whole new generation of young black activists is rising up. And let me just say that if those young kids in Ferguson, if they hadn't been out there every night, night after night, when they were alone, when it was risky and dangerous, when they were getting almost no support, if they hadn't done that heavy lifting, night after night, there wouldn't probably have been a Department of Justice report, a Ferguson commission, a policing commission. But they did, and as Brittany Packnett, one of those powerful young leaders, has said to me, we don't just need allies, we need accomplices. In the beginning, God created all of us in the image of God. To have dominion, meaning stewardship over God's earth and all of the creation. But one people decide to have dominion over another people. The image of God's called Imago Dei. You can't treat slaves like Imago Dei. So you got to say they're less than human. so your faith gets intact. Our faith is no longer intact. It's time to put it back together again. And this is the time to understand these parables and what lessons they can teach us about how we together can build a bridge to a new America. We need multiracial truth-telling about race and multiracial action to build a bridge to a new America. And for coming to that conversation today, I thank you all.
To further this conversation, it's my pleasure to introduce Manya Brashear-Broshman, our moderator.
Let's have a great conversation today.
A very dear friend of mine once said that we in the human services business, we manage people in their condition. And if you manage someone in poverty, that's where they stay. So whether it's church or whether it's government, African Americans and Latinos have been managed in their condition and therefore have not been permitted to move out.
As I think about and reflect on the book, several words and phrases just jump out at me. Presumptive dangerousness. White privilege is the legacy of white supremacy. I'm not a racist, am I? What if there was no video? We've gone from a moment to a movement. Are our police guardians or soldiers? White fragility, the geography of race, the fear of a new America, but ultimately the bridge to a new America. And in a book like this, to cover the gamut of the civil rights movement, Black Lives Matter, police use of force, immigration and racial profiling, stand your ground laws, is a tremendous overview of the challenges that we face. And each one of those areas are areas that we at the United States Commission on Civil Rights are focusing on.
A congregation is in Evanston, Illinois, which is a suburb that is diverse racially. And a lot of people who move to Evanston pride themselves that they live in a racially diverse suburb. But as one of my colleagues, Father Bob Oldershaw, who is now retired from the St. Nick's Church, said, in Evanston we have something called drive-by diversity, which I think we could say we have in this nation as a whole. Drive-by diversity is the fact that, yeah, we have black and white in the same school. Yes, we work together in our businesses. Yes, we see each other on the street. But do we have real relationships with each other? Do we understand each other? Do we go into each other's homes? Have we heard each other's stories? And when we asked that question to the Evanston community, people were embarrassed. And they said no. And we need to talk as a country about our responsibility. Stop with the guilt already, right? Maybe we weren't slaveholders. Maybe we didn't do anything personally. But that doesn't take away the fact that we are responsible for changing the dynamic in this country.
I look forward to the conversation continuing that the foundation of it is truth. 4/5 of the world is black or brown. Reverend Wallis mentioned that the majority is changing from an all-white demographic to a minority demographic. We have to deal with the truth of that. And not just change our actions, but change our hearts, because we can't get to the changing of policy and how we interact with the cashier that looks differently from us until something takes place within our heart. So it's a two-part call that repentance calls us to. Change of actions, but before that, a change of heart.
Sometimes our communities, spiritual traditions are supposed to agitate the soul, to generate, to challenge us to think about the gap between our professed ideals and our lived realities. And so if we think about sin as a violation of a covenant, a divine covenant that we have, and if that covenant with the Creator is a notion that we are all supposed to be part of this human creation together, these gross disparities that exist on all levels, they're part of that violation. violation, and corporations and policies contribute to it. And the budget is just one illustration here in the state of Illinois. If people felt the pain and felt the personal sin of what communities, particularly low-income communities of color, are suffering from as a result of this budget, they would move on it. They would move in a way that would allow them to identify.
So white, liberal, progressive folks have got to get past this notion that racism is a problem that other people have, and we want to help minorities with their problems. This is about our identity, our nomenclature, our language, and the ideology and idolatry that we are still stuck with. So this is why repentance is much deeper than just policy change is critical. We're not going to get there until we go deeper here. And that's what I think we really can do. Building a bridge to a new America is asking the questions we really haven't asked as deeply before.
Thank you all for having the courage to be on this panel.